listening to Nightmare on Film Street. The current time is 6:66. Traffic is clear ahead from here to the afterlife, but it's hell outside. For the next hour, you're on Nightmare time. So, let's give a grave welcome to our hosts, John and Kim.
Hello again, fiends, and welcome back to Nightmare Alley, the spooky little side street podcast in the regular Nightmare on Film Street feed. We are coming at you this week with a bonus episode of the podcast. I'm John.
I'm Kim.
Reporting live from on the road in the RV of darkness. We're still on our way to the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival. And we're here today to share a little conversation we had with Hellraiser director David Bruckner. We had originally planned on talking with David for a written interview on the website, but we had so much fun chatting with him about the Cenobites and the whole Hellraiser universe that they reimagined. Clive Barker's weird universe of chains and fire and pain that we wanted to share it with you on the podcast here today. So real quick, before we throw over to the trailer, Kim, what are 3 good things about Hellraiser?
The first thing is that if you're anything like me and you had a hard time getting into the Hellraiser franchise, it's a lot to chew off. It's very gory, it's very extreme, and definitely quite cerebral. And that isn't to say that the 2022 version isn't that, but I find it does a really great job of reintroducing this version of what the Cenobites are, what the puzzle box is, and everything else. For the unengaged, or, if you need to get re-engaged with the franchise, or you haven't caught up in a bit, or this is your very first Hellraiser movie.
Yeah, number 2, I'm gonna go ahead and say that this movie is so fucking gory. Holy shit, is this movie gory. Even just the Cenobites alone look super fucked up. And then they do a lot of super fucked up things to everybody that's silly enough to open up that puzzle box. If you are a gore hound, you are going to love this new Hellraiser movie. Streaming services like Hulu, not always the place you go to for super gory kind of extreme movies, but this one delivers.
And it really had to. Point 3, I'm going to go with the color palette in the lighting.
It looks great, right?
Every single shot of this movie, every single Cenobite is hero image, trading card worthy. The colors and the lighting are so fun and spooky, and it's such a unique film because you're melding 2 worlds together. When the gates open from the puzzle box, whatever the other world is seeping into whatever set piece we're on. So there's a lot of opportunity to be really creative, and they definitely were.
Yeah, and all of that is done practically. You'll hear all about it in the podcast here. So we're going to throw you over to the trailer for Hellraiser, and when we come back, we'll be chatting with director David Bruckner.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It's really nice.
You can hold it.
What is it?
It's a puzzle. And it's almost finished. Keep going.
So if I solve it, do I get a prize?
I do.
It has 6 sides, 6 configurations. It opens up, and it cuts you. And then they come to collect.
It's time. Greater delights await. We wish to see you proceed. Feed it. Their blood, their pain. All for us. What is it you pray for?
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, man. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. We've been dying to talk to you since we saw The Ritual back at TIFF.
Oh, cool.
Years ago.
Yeah, that one is, I mean, we watch it all the time. Like, we've done watch parties on Netflix with it. We show all of our like listeners and stuff. Like, it's just our go-to.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's a weird. It's become a kind of a comfort horror film for a few folks. Like,
which is surprising, but not really.
I kind of get it. You know, it's like I just want to hang in these woods for a little bit. But no, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
So I don't know if this is the case for you, but I've found that a lot of people see the original Hellraiser like way too young. Do you remember how old were you when you first saw Hellraiser?
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because I've been doing the rounds talking about the movie, and people are like, "What's your introduction to Hellraiser?" And I'm like, "Well, I was probably 12, and it was Hellraiser 3, and that was the movie that found me first." And I didn't. I was easily frightened, so horror films were hard for me to get into in a way. I had a friend, Kevin Coughlin, in high school, who was my gateway drug into horror. And so he would drag me in and make me watch a lot of these movies that just wouldn't go down easy for me. But Hellraiser 3 was terrifying. And I know it differs from the earlier chapters in a lot of ways, but I do think it captured the kind of existential dread. There just is no escape. And the idea that always stuck with me was the notion that there's a fate worse than death, even in a horror film, which is like tortured for an infinity. And all that kind of tinged with the judgment that comes with some of the religious iconography, and being that I grew up in the church, like that shit just terrified me. So, but that was my early introduction, and then it was a bit later when I started to get into horror a bit more that I went back and I saw the first one, and I saw the second one, and then years later read Hellbound Heart, and obviously, like, I mean, the first Hellraiser is a masterpiece, you know, and huge fan of the second one, which grows over time. And sometimes you start to go, wait, is that my favorite Hellraiser? I don't know where I'm landing with this necessarily, but yeah, I've always held the franchise in incredibly high regard, and I always thought of it. These aren't my words, but somebody described it recently as graduate level horror, which was it had a special place because the barrier to entry is that it's so abrasive and so hardcore that you almost have to cross that line with it to understand some of the richer themes that are there, and to realize that there's a real poetry to it, and that it's much more advanced than what you're used to. And
that's so true.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the most cerebral, gory horror films. Like, you normally don't get both of those two in the same thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love hearing too that the third one was the one that was your introduction, because maybe it was just like the right time, but I remember that one being the one everybody talked about on the playground. Like, there's this fucking dude who like shoots CDs and kills people. that was every kid's favorite when I was growing up.
You know, and at the time, I was CD Head. What's his name?
I think it's CD Head. I think you're right.
CD Head was a completely. I had no problems with it. I was like, this is a fascinating cenobite. You know, and now you're like CDs. But
what was his sin? Like, what? How did he get to that point?
That's his sin, was being a DJ. But no, I mean, his walk was incredible, and he had the bizarre robotic sound effect movements, which I thought was like an interesting addition. But no, I think they captured the wrongness in that one in a way that like really, really stuck with me. And I thought the statue was terrifying. I thought Pinhead sort of fused into the statue, drinking blood and of his victims, and there were a few really, really terrifying moments in that one.
Yeah, and so when it comes to sort of creating the cenobites in your movie, how much of it was on the page, and how much of it was sort of a collaboration between you and the Russells?
Yeah, so the script, Ben and Luke had created. I mean, obviously, the priest Pinhead was in our film, and there was a character we called lovingly the Gasp, which was kind of an ode to the credited female cenobite in the original Hellraiser. And then beyond that, they had a chatterer, but we had no idea what he would look like. And they had described two cenobites, the Weeper and the Asphyx, which short for to asphyxiate oneself.
They have such metal names.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also they're all kind of, I kind of love this about cenobites, that they're sort of, they're the names that a layman, a passerby would use to describe them. So they're the names we have for them. Who knows what the names that they have for themselves might be.
Yeah, like Pinhead doesn't go by Pinhead.
Right. And, it's often reported that neither Clive nor Pinhead quite appreciated the name. So, that was pop culture did that to our priest. But yeah, so they were on the page. And then when I came on board, we started to have a conversation of like what cenobites would look like in this new movie and how we would approach it. And a lot of that was going back to, the core themes in the film, where this film would what it would bring in from the original and what it would choose to explore. And I got in a room with Keith Thompson, who's our lead concept designer, has a brilliant way with imagery and is educated in all manner of design and genre art. And we started having a conversation. And out of that, we started to kind of play around with, what the iconography might be. And we knew that we had to update it in certain ways. And we had a big idea and we ran with it. But it was out of those conversations that a few of the other cenobites emerged. And, I was trying to get as many of them as I could in the movie, obviously.
Yeah. You're going to absolutely hate this next bit. We're on the road right now, and we had to watch this on the laptop. But I'm very much looking forward to watching it at home on our brand new television. Because I assume maybe it's the asphyxiation cenobite. He's got the weirdest looking head. Is that the guy? What's his deal? I guess is my question.
What's the weirdest looking head? Or are you talking about the mask, who has the kind of absent?
Yes,
kind of,
that.
Yeah. No, the asphyxiation is the one where the back skin is kind of pulled up over the face and stretched. He's kind of always in a state of near suffocation.
Yeah.
No, the mask was. We started down a path of. I think, look, it's in the trailer. Has been the conversation that. One of the things we did with the lore was sort of expand the universe of experiences that the cenobites have on offer.
Mm-hmm.
The sensation, the journey towards pleasure is there, which is present in the original film, but also there are these, other ideas and, lore, infinite knowledge. What would it be like to have the universe open before you and learn too much? Would it probably be terrifying in some way? Our Lateran configuration, which is, about is love, is to see two souls coalesce. What would it be to be too intertwined, to become too close to the presence of another being? What is it to really know someone? And is there terror in that as well? Liminal, which is sensation and pleasure. Lazarus, which is resurrection, which I think is about permanence. Permanence is about an infinity of time. And then power. But we wanted a cenobite that spoke to lore, spoke to wisdom, which is the second configuration. And the mask was an ironic depiction of that idea. And so he has a kind of educated, refined quality about him. We often joke that in the film, the mask is just on the edge of offering you a drink. And he's definitely inviting you to a very weird party, but
they all are inviting you to a very weird party.
Yeah, beware. But he's adorned with scripture in his flesh.
Oh shit.
That's why we have to watch it on the TV.
I know. Goddamn, I'm so mad.
Yeah, it's there. It's you probably got to look for it, but it's there. And then he's also, the irony of it just being that part of his head is removed, and the backside of his head and the intellectual side of what he might understand has been carved away. I like to think he's an operating medulla oblongata. That is, if I said that right. So it's both base, but then it's also there's this intellectual quality to it. We can ponder what experience he might be having, but he's one of my favorites.
I love how much thought you guys have put into each and every one of these cenobites. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Because you really see it in design. Yeah. Is there one that's like your favorite? Like, is there one that you like the most?
I've kind of gone through phases with all of them.
They're all your children.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm the trailer showed off a few of them. The Gasp is not in the trailer. I'm excited for people to see the Gasp, who's played incredibly by Selena Lowe. And the Asphyx is not in the trailer either. And there is a cenobite that exists in only one shot of the film, which I think is fun, which hopefully just points to a bigger world. But I love them all.
And okay, this is maybe like almost the same question, but like, let's say you find yourself in an audience with the Leviathan, like which one are you choosing?
Oh, geez. I haven't thought about it. I mean, hopefully, if we've done our job, every path is terrifying. But I would probably choose the boring. I would cling to life. I would.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, I would at the threshold. Just I would say thank you to the cenobites and back away slowly.
I was like, how do I turn this back?
Right. Or I wouldn't make it very long in these movies. So.
Oh yeah, definitely not. There's no way I'd last. I mean, heck, I think even the lead character just kind of like lucks her way into surviving for the first 10 minutes.
Oh, it's complete circumstance, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going either way.
Yeah. So the kills as well are obviously like incredibly gruesome. I assume that had to be like, especially practical effects had to be like a top priority for you going into this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Hellraiser is revered for its practical work. I'm someone who also believes that in horror more than any other genre, like you need real light landing on objects. Like if you're stepping into a fantasy world, if you're into sci-fi, you can kind of create an imagination where there's the little bit of distance that comes from CGI. But something about horror is that your lizard brain needs to believe what it's seeing on some level. And so you got to do it for real. And you're also always in these movies out on a limb with your cast doing some really crazy stuff under time constraint. And something magic happens on set when real monsters walk out and people have to fight through like an actual puzzle box that transforms in your hand. That I think, going through the process of actually creating that stuff for real, just it puts us all there in a really, really special way. And it's also becoming a bit of a lost art. And so we did as much as we could practical on this movie. Mm-hmm. There is a little comp blood, there's not much CGI, even some of the background textures or miniatures. Like we really tried to do it as old school as we could. Yeah, Labyrinth is often miniature. And you may remember a spinning pillar at one point, like all that stuff's, actually built. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. And it's a blast to create, but the middle ground between a full-on impossible practical approach, which would be probably beyond our budget, and something that's CGI, which the common approach now is to build things for real and then kind of comp them together. And it creates, I think, a feeling that I hope echoes from the 90s in some way. There's some charm to it.
How did you find your set department, like the people that are making those sets for you? Because they look amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, Catherine Eder is an amazing production designer who I got to work with on The Night House. And it was our movie before this that had some similar kind of architectural ideas and transformations in it, which was also relevant to Hellraiser in some ways. But she also really, really ran with the kind of the sort of regal grandeur that we wanted to put in the movie that feels very Hellraiser to me. I always like the idea that the forces of antagonism can kind of flavor a movie. And I felt like the Cenobites in some ways had this kind of majesty that despite their kind of gruesome appearance, that there's such a vanity to it. We fashioned a lot of their looks from looking at runway fashion. And
they are very high fashion. They have such good posture.
Right? Like we would do these Cenobite kind of walk classes where everybody would get together and sort of play and like, what is it to feel everything all at once? You're in this extreme state of body modification. We talked about the idea that all their nerves are forever exposed. So you're just always you're feeling everything all at once as a Cenobite, but you have this you're kind of gliding across it with this sort of Zen composure. And there's a confidence to say like, try this, you guys, it's great. But the flavor of that is something that we also wanted present in the production design, was something that wasn't afraid to be, flamboyant and garish. And of course we had this amazing mansion setting that is the home of one of our characters. And Catherine really ran amok with that in a really great way. But we tried to get design into every frame.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised to hear that she's sort of been carried over from the Night House, because the design on that movie is incredible.
And it's also mirroring both that it's so integral kind of to the plot in both films, that like you kind of have the worlds melding in this film, and then not to spoil Night House, but there's some involvement with the setting.
Yeah, and it was fun because Night House was. I feel like architectural horror or geography horror should be like an interesting. Like,
that's a great subgenre.
Yeah, well, it's something that I think for me, I've always been fascinated with spaces gone wrong. You know, early dreams being a kid, and I don't know what your nightmares are. For me, the idea of I'm in the room, but it's different. You know, that anything House of Leaves is
right.
Book was an influence, of course, to the Night House. I just love that space, and in Hellraiser, you know, you've got these, we call them dimensional doorways, which is in the old movies, you open the box and the flats of the set open up and the cenobites emerge from somewhere else in cosmic fashion. And so we took some of our experiences in Night House into this and tried to do a few different things with that the movements of the world of two dimensions interlocking and opening up sort of mirror the box transformations in some way. And those are also practical sets, most of them.
That's what I assumed. It was like, it's like a fucking magic trick when it shows up too. It's just like, I know that this is happening like in camera, or at least you can see it. Cause like, I think even, the actors as well, but like as a viewer, like you understand that this is something that's tangibly happening in front of you.
Like horror labyrinth, when she goes through like the wall, the worst version of that.
Yeah, totally. It's surprisingly hard to build sets on casters and pull them apart. Like it's a really great movie problem, but it's the kind of stuff that people get excited about on set.
Yeah. That would just be so cool to watch. I'm sure you guys just did it for fun, just I'm going to walk through the bathroom wall now.
We actually have one of our storyboard artists who did a bunch of previs for us is this wonderful filmmaker and artist, Pat Horvath, who also did all the negative spaceman images in Night House for us, which had a similar.
I love that name for him.
Yeah. It was that was a figure that emerged from the architecture in some way, if you were standing in the right vantage. And Pat's job on that was to figure out how to do that in these kind of practical real world settings and locations. So we would kind of leave him at the house sometimes overnight, and he would just play around with like cardboard cutouts and lose his mind and come back with them.
Wow.
Like, I knew these 10 things. It kind of looks like, oh man. And for Hellraiser, he did a lot of previs for those wall transformations. And we had some really elaborate ones that we just couldn't figure out how to do practically. Yeah, we tried, but some of them pretty elaborate reconstructions of an environment happening that I realized once we were on the ground in Belgrade that it was a big ask.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, even the stuff that he was doing for you on the Night House is a huge ask, because it's like watching it looks impossible. So to know that you're trying to take that one step further in your next movie, I can see how it broke him.
Yeah.
I got to assume that's like a big part of your pre-production as well is probably like defining like a color palette. The color palette's like such a dumbed down version of what I want to say here, but like the movie is so red and so blue and it looks fucking amazing. I just love how much the color pops in this, and it seems to be like an approach that I'm noticing across everything that you do. I got to imagine that's really important to you.
Yeah, that's like it's kind of fun. That's sort of the icing in a way, but it's also, I kind of, I look to my keys a bunch where that stuff comes from. We just like sort of let it emerge over time. Eli Bourne, our DP, did a wonderful job with light in this. And one of the things that's great about Hellraiser is that the gags are so complex and fascinating. I keep joking that it could have been a guy in a mask with a knife, but it's not. It's interdimensional, like sadomasochistic demons that shoot chains. Labyrinth, is a lot of moving parts, and which is a testament to what Clive did in '87 on such a limited budget. But here we had a lot of toys, and it just every single department, they had such a unique set of tasks in front of them. One of the things for Eli was getting the dimensional light right, which was this kind of vaporous blue light glow that would move between the cracks in the walls in the original film, but it always kind of accompanied the cenobites. And it's a very particular kind of blue. and you can shade it too far to the red or you can shade it too far to the green, and it feels different in some ways. And so Eli came up with a really amazing broken way to create it. There's this kind of organic aliasing to the way the light crawls across the walls and the way it paints on the cenobites at times. And that was some bizarre contraption that he created where he's shooting concert lighting into various moving textured bounce boards. And so it was kind of an elaborate setup every time we used it. But finding that blue really defined a big part of the palette for us, and then figuring out how we would employ it. And then you get into the end of the film and you're cutting around a lot. You start thinking, I just want the audience to know where they're at instantly. And so we started going from there into this interesting dungeon environment that has like a contrasting image, and it all kind of congeals into the experience. But yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
That's really interesting about that light contraption, because I feel like that also kind of piggybacks on the lizard brain stuff about like how you can't quite tell that there's something off about it, but somewhere like subconsciously you're like, the light shouldn't move like that.
Well, some of it's also an update of just, I mean, you look at a lot of genre movies in the 80s and 90s, and every time something happens, I mean, even the original Hellraiser and the amazing hospital scene where Kirsty opens the box and the cenobites arrive is like maybe 3 of the best minutes in horror history. You know, the cenobites are standing in bright white light, but there's misty fans right off camera just pummeling them. Like, and there's so much environmental interaction. And I find that the audience has an appetite for that. You just sometimes don't even realize you're seeing it. Like, people really used to push thunder and lightning. Like, anytime something would happen, it was just like pouring in from the windows. It's like, if I was ever in a storm like that, it would be a very memorable moment in my life. So much lightning, guys. But with this, because Eli came up with this way of doing it, there's something's in motion all the time. Like, towards the end of the film, really every image, the light is crawling and creeping and maneuvering in strange ways. And something interesting and similar to that is that we tried to find there was a pace, there was a kind of a medium pace that we talked about that was the right feeling for the film, which is something that is moving confidently towards you at ease. It's not chasing you. It's not too slow. It's just kind of happening. And the rhythm of that and the intensity of it was something that we replicated in the dimensional transformations, also in the way Eli's light crawls across the cenobites, also in the movements of the puzzle box, was something that we talked about a bunch.
Oh, cool.
Right? Yeah.
It's so crazy how much movement there is and everything, like even just in how the light gets shot across everything. The house is moving. It's all designed around a puzzle box. It's like
the whole movie is a puzzle box.
Yeah, there's that. It's like listening to Steven Spielberg talk about shooting on water and how like impossible it was. It's just like you managed to shoot on water while staying like on a cement floor.
I'm glad all that comes across. Like it's we were bidding over our heads on this one. Like, you know, we had more means than the Hellraiser films that came before us, but we were still way in over our heads. So I'm glad that comes across. Thanks for mentioning that, because it was a lot of, you know, excuse the metaphor, but moving parts. You know.
Yeah. So who gets to keep the box? Like, do you have that at your house right now?
I'm sure there were like 30 boxes.
I've got several of them right here, which I know we're audio only, but since we're on Zoom,
but we get to see. So.
Awesome. But these are wrap gifts for a few folks. But yeah, we got a few of our puzzle boxes. But we had, I think, because you know the boxes are practical and they have moving parts, it's impossible to build a box that moves as much as the box does in the movie. So yeah, we've had different stages of each formation, and I think we're close to 30 different iterations of the box.
Wow.
So yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, that's actually one of the really cool things about the box too, is that like it has an impossible movement to it.
Mm-hmm.
The cenobites
like
have an
it can get
quality
impossibly
to them.
Large when you're like, where are all these pieces coming from?
Yeah, it's like the nightmares you would have, where like you know that there's something, like you can see it and it looks normal, but something about it tells you that it's wrong. I guess it all comes back to that lizard brain. Like just looking at it, you know that you are in danger.
I'm so glad you mentioned the nightmare logic, because it's something that also fascinates me, and is something we talked about a bit. Because the first instinct, there are a couple CGI transformations in the movie, because there's just some things the box does that would have been impossible to do practically. But the first instinct is to do some crazy Transformers abstraction, and then there's a conscious effort to scale it back to being something that is just past what might be possible in your mind. And it toys with the audience. So the first couple of times it happens, you're kind of like, okay, all right, I can see how that works. But then, of course, it starts to do much in certain ways as the movie gets weirder, and it kind of takes us on a journey in that sense. So, but yeah, absolutely. Like, it starts to bend the rules of reality at a certain point, but hopefully doesn't go too far.
And in terms of rules, I guess, like, I don't know if this is the same for Kim, but like, I have always had like and I think this is intentional, especially in the earlier movies. I've always had a hard time figuring out how the world of Hellraiser works, but like, I had it was really easy to follow in your movie. So I want to thank you for that. Like, I've always felt too dumb for the Hellraiser movies, but I really locked into this one in a way that I hadn't with the other ones.
There's a weird, and you talked about this a lot when you were writing your review, is that like everybody just treats cenobites as facts. Like in the horror community, nobody talks about what a cenobite is or describes like, oh, they're these hell beings. They're kind of like the gatekeepers of endless pain. And like, nobody says that. People are just like, oh, the cenobites came. And you're like, yeah. What's a cenobite? What is this? Like, what does it do?
Yeah. What is a cenobite? I always thought of them as, well, there's so many different things, right? But I think the thing that for me really became the North Star in this is that they're individuals who have gone too far into the realms of human experience. And they're more advanced than us. And so there has to be the promise on some level that what they have on offer could be enjoyable. Maybe you want it, but as we were talking about earlier, like, it's just terrifying to the extremity that it's being explored in some sense. And there's a lot more, especially in the earlier movies, that can be contained in what they are, and especially in what they represent. But that was something that, we could really attach to. But, to the other point that you were making, like, yeah, this is a modern studio horror film. Like, we're trying to take Hellraiser and give it to an audience that may not be as familiar with what is somewhat of a niche franchise in horror. And even though it's well known, it's kind of surprising for us in the journey of taking it out, how many people don't know about it, or how many people are stuck at that barrier to entry where it was maybe too abrasive for them in some ways. One of the things I love about the original movies is that they don't follow a strict rule system necessarily. It's very much the language of dreams. There's a surreal quality to it, and it's kind of permitted in those films to kind of run amok in that way. But I think given modern audiences and where horror was, we did kind of feel like, okay, this has to both capture that feeling, but it also has to have some semblance of order that we can kind of attach to. So hopefully we struck that balance where it makes sense, but it doesn't make too much sense.
Yeah. Oh no, I still have questions, but I feel like
you should have questions though, because it's like, what is that world that they come from? Like, but you should also like never quite understand.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what makes you want to reach out to them. You're like, no, I just need to follow them for a half a minute and see what's going on.
Like, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
I really love your saying that they are like the end of existence and like they're experiencing everything at once. It almost makes that movie Martyrs is like a prequel to Hellraiser. Like Hellraiser was what comes after Martyrs.
Right. Pascal was he was on to do a Hellraiser movie at one point.
Oh, wow.
How wild would that have been? I can turn out for that in a second. Martyrs is brilliant. But yeah, no, there's certainly some similarities there.
That's so cool. Like, just to think of like the sensation and like, oh, it makes the hairs on my neck stand up.
But David, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. We like to close out every review by asking people what their dream double feature would be at the drive-in. So if you could play any two movies, what would you play?
Oh, wow. At the drive-in?
That's the qualifier, right? That changes the question.
It does change because you're like, ooh,
you got to watch this in your car.
Nighttime, fresh air, terrible sound quality.
I have the weirdest combination of movies just popped in my head, which is Wake in Fright, and then rounded out with Cemetery Man.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't actually know that they go together. It's a weird night at the movies, but I'll just leave. Yeah.
What is Wake in Fright? I haven't heard that.
Wake in Fright is this incredible Australian movie about debauchery. from I think the late 70s. And you got to watch. It's kind of like what if a Boozy Bender was a horror film run amok. Okay. And you talk about nightmare logic, like it becomes a circular trip into madness. It's one of the most unsettling films I've ever seen.
Okay.
Right on.
It's not a great drive-in movie, actually, on second thought. I don't know. It's kind of maybe I recommend that in a comfortable place where you have everything together, not when you're partying.
You have to drive home in the dark.
Yeah, but highly recommend. Like interesting, kind of. I wouldn't call it a horror film, but it's in the family. Yeah.
All right. At least you close out with a nice laugh in Cemetery Man.
Cemetery Man.
That's a fun ride.
I'm a big fan of Cemetery Man. It holds up too. I mean, it's weird. I don't know. So not all of it. Yeah, most of it holds up. But
we're backtracking real fast here.
Yeah. But it's surreal. Rupert Everett, he was on fire. Like that's some special work in there.
Thank you again to David Bruckner for taking the time to talk to us today on the podcast. Hellraiser 2022 is currently streaming on Hulu. It came out this weekend. I know a lot of people have been watching it for their 31-day horror challenge picks this week. It is a perfect gory movie for a late night in October, and we highly recommend you check it out.
That's it for us for this bonus episode. We hope you enjoyed it. This little trick-or-treat Halloween treat. Until next time, I'm Kim.
I'm John.
Stay creepy.
It appears you made it out alive, but we'll get you next time. Help us to grow the horde. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. More terror can be found lurking on our website, nofspodcast.com. Until next time, stay creepy, fiends.